Let's go. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. I am super excited to have our guest, Jennifer Chapman, joining us from Ambition Leadership. And we are thrilled to have you joining us, Jennifer.
I am really excited to be here.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're going to tap into all your knowledge today. So everybody look out for a great conversation. But before we get into that, I want to just give a little background on Jennifer and who she is so that, our audience has some context. So Jennifer used to be a workaholic, and she's known as the go-to person for getting things done and managing those most difficult clients, which is always a challenge. And especially for those Fortune 500 consulting firm. And so she thrived in challenging situations, proving to others time and again that she was invincible. So I'm taking it that you've been known as Superwoman through your career. That's awesome. Like that. So many of us women, we do think we have to be, that superhero. She's also known firsthand that the actions we take and the words that we say have an impact on the people around us. And we'll dig into that today. But Jennifer has this warm and approachable personality accompanied by her sharp skills, her expertise, and her business savviness. And she's dedicated herself to being a passionate advocate for a number of different topics. She is a leadership coach, and she's really focused on developing the next generation of influential leaders. And she can be found spending time with her husband, 5 children, and she has a new puppy. So, when they're hitting the trails with their dog and going crazy trying to balance the working life and family, we're just thrilled that you took time out today, Jennifer, to join us. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. It's a passion of mine to make the path a little smoother for others, and I'm excited to get to help out your audience.
Oh, that's great. Great. And I know they'll find this enjoyable. So let's jump in. Okay. Let's talk about, one of the things that is your specialty and you're an expert in is how to manage your boss. And this is such a great topic because, as we both know, I grew up in the corporate world as well. It's difficult navigating your boss. And if you're not managing them, life can be a little bit miserable. So, and it's also about managing them in a productive way for you to reach your potential, for whatever organization you're working for. So let's jump in. Why is this important to manage your boss?
Well, first of all, I see people, men and women, who tend to give up a lot of their own power to their boss. Oh, I've got this terrible boss, therefore I do not like my job and cannot like my job. Or, one trap I got into in the Fortune 500 firm that I worked in was, well, my boss has these expectations of me and therefore I must meet them. And I didn't push back and I didn't say no. And it came to a point in my life where I was having physical health problems, not to mention the stress and the emotional issues. And it took a while for me to really claim that I'm the boss of me. And so I need to figure out how I'm going to manage all these different expectations and while also being true to who I am and what I need and now what my family needs. So I'm really passionate about helping my clients get clear about that. The second thing I think that's important about managing your boss is I was just talking to a client about an hour ago who is clashing. So there are things that he sees that are critical to his organization, but then he reports directly to the CEO and it's not even on the CEO's radar. And as he was sharing with me some of the conversations he was having and some of the frustration, I asked him some questions about his boss, like what kind of legacy does your boss want to leave behind? What are your boss's primary goals? And he couldn't answer those questions. And I said, until you know the answer to those questions, I can't help you communicate better with him. I'm like, you find out those things, and then now we've got a way to get on the same page, so to speak, and to put things in the language that your boss is going to care about.
Wow, those two questions are fabulous because for a number of reasons, actually, because, even when you were talking about your, giving your power away to your boss, right? Like you are responsible for your power. And just because you report to that person doesn't mean that they have the right to strip you of that. And it's a mutual, right? So that both parties are successful, because when you're successful and doing well, then your boss is going to be successful and doing well. But what you tapped into there, I think that's so critical, is humanizing the conversation, right? Like really understanding, who is this person that I'm reporting to? So, that can help level set more of how you're showing up as the employee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, most of us, I think, are lucky enough at some point in our lives to have had a really great boss.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for those, right? But then we get a lot of people who have been promoted into these leadership positions because that was just the next step. But maybe they didn't have the best people skills to be put in that position. Some people get training, leadership training. Some people get no support. And one thing that we're seeing happening right now is, you've heard a lot about the Great Resignation. Well, it's bigger than that, because we've known that the baby boomers were going to retire for a long time, but it's like real. And the pandemic ushered in a whole lot of retirement. But then what people don't understand is that the baby boomer generation is humongous. And to put in perspective, Gen X is 1/4 the size of the baby boomer generation. Now, Gen Y is bigger than Gen X, is about 2 times the size of Gen X, or about 50% of the baby boomer generation. So what does that mean? That means not only are the baby boomers retiring and opening up all these positions, but it also means that literally, if all the baby boomers were to retire by the end of this month, we would not have enough bodies to replace them. Even if you combined the Gen X and Gen Y together, you wouldn't. And so we are going to see a lot of vacancies that are going to be open and left open. So people are going to have larger teams to manage than they've been used to before. And then Gen Xers, I'm sorry to tell you, but you've worked your butt off maybe to get into the leadership position you're in now. And you're going to have a millennial who's put in 20% of the hours you have, who's going to end up being your peer. And it's going to happen because there is nobody else to take that spot. And so it's a really interesting crossroads where you have to decide, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to sit there and complain that that's not fair? Or are you going to just say, you know what, this is the situation, and I'm going to choose how I react to it. And then with these dynamics I'm explaining, how many people are we seeing now in the workplace, and are we going to see over the next 10 to 20 years that have no clue what they're doing? Some of them will be brave enough to admit it and ask for help. Many of them are going to feel pressure to, I'm just going to have to fake it until I make it. So if you're going to set back, if your MO is, I'm going to sit back and just let these bosses figure it out, and if they're a bad boss, well, that's their problem, you're not going to be doing yourself any favors. You've got to take a proactive approach. And for the most part, believe that people are doing the best that they can with what they have and what they know and what they've been exposed to. And if you want a different relationship with your boss, then it's going to be on you to decide that that's going to be a priority. And I can hopefully today give you some tips for how to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, and again, you said, a number of things there that are super important. And it's interesting because I just did a discussion where I was the speaker and we were talking about exactly what you just said, right? And it's about how do we prepare this generation for leadership, because they are being put into roles that the expectation is you get in there and you be successful, but we haven't given them the tools to be successful. And it's so important for that investment into leadership development, preparing them for soft skills, preparing them for how to have conversations, right? And I love what you said there about the onus is on the individual. And I think that's true for any conversation, right? Like you can't sit back and stew over that. You have to go into action. So it's how you have those conversations. So maybe you could share an example of a scenario where, let's say all of a sudden, you have a younger person who's now your peer and they've been promoted to this leadership role. Like share with us, how you can have an intentional, impactful relationship.
So I would say to put your ego aside, because that's not going to help. And you're not going to be able to influence whether or not the other person chooses to put their ego aside or not. And just, you're going to have to constantly be reminding yourself, and this applies in so many scenarios, that just, I have to be clear on what's mine to own and what's not. And you focus on what's in your control. And then the other things, as frustrating as they are, you just have to accept to a degree that, okay, these things are out of my control. And then when you've got a peer who has less experience than you do, when appropriate, you could offer, hey, if I actually have a spreadsheet that helps me track X, Y, and Z, let me know if you're interested. Or, hey, if you would like a sounding board to figure out this problem over here, I'd love to listen to what you have to say. And if you assume that the other person, again, is doing the best that they can, and then have just offers of help, offers of support, but then put it in their court on whether or not they're going to take you up on it, then great, you can help them. If they choose not to have the help, well, that's their choice and you honor it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So sorry, when you were saying that, so my brain goes into, okay, but how do we get them to collaborate together, right? So if one person is more resistant or more reluctant, it's how do you start to build then those relationships and build that connection so that it's mutual respect for one another? Because that's one of the things I hear often is, especially with somebody who is younger that's been promoted, or is, let's say they're on the fast track to promotion, they're feeling like, why would anybody listen to me, right? Why would they care what I have to say? And so it's, how do we make that more of a mutual relationship versus, let me share with you my stuff. What are you going to share with me, kind of thing.
Right. And if we were focused on the younger leaders and confidence, we could do a whole separate podcast on that. But I think as far as just getting that mutual relationship of respect and collaboration is for the ones with more experience to remember, you don't know everything. And often there are things that these younger generations know and do that are second nature to them that we're still catching up on. Like, I'll admit right now, like Twitter absolutely intimidates me. Pinterest, oh my gosh. Like, there are people like, well, just look on Pinterest. Like, well, I get on, but it's like, there's so many links and you get lost down these rabbit holes. And there's a lot with technology and apps that the younger generations are just so savvy with.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are like, well, I have, 20 more years of work experience than this other person does. Yes. And recognize that there's got to be something that they know that you don't, that they can teach you. And if nothing else, they just have a perspective of those just different generations that if you understand them better, you're going to be able to connect better with other stakeholders, other employees that are in the same generation. So one way I like to break the ice when I'm working with somebody that my initial reaction might be, oh my gosh, like you're in over your head. You should not even be at this job. Is I just take a breath and then I think about is what problem am I experiencing right now, or a challenge or an opportunity? And then I ask that person a question. Hey, I've been thinking about this, or I've been trying to figure out how to handle this situation. What would you do? And, or, it could be any question. But then when you get them talking and sharing, and you listen intently, like this person just might have an original idea that you wouldn't have thought about without that person. And once they feel respected and appreciated for what they bring, they're going to be much more likely to not feel intimidated and be willing to come to you and ask for help when they need it. But it often is you who have to make the first move.
Yeah. I think that's very wise. And when you were saying that, what it reminded me of is like, we can all be the student and the teacher at the same time. And when you can approach it that way, it's opening up space for conversation, but opening up space to solidify relationships. It's funny. I was having a conversation with my daughter one time, and she goes, Mom, she goes, I know this is what you do for a living and you teach people, but, and she said something, and I said, well, she said, you know everything or something like that. And I said, no, actually, I don't. I said, I learn from you every single day. Like you teach me things about myself, about perspective, to your point, Jennifer, like, and that is so powerful, but it also has really, to your point, it solidifies the relationship, right? Because it's an open space then to be able to talk about things very differently than just on the surface, or it being one-sided. It can be a very engaging discussion. So that's awesome. So where do you think reluctance comes from when it comes to managing your boss?
I think a lot of people are afraid they're going to overstep their bounds and make their boss angry. Like managing your boss is kind of you could see it being, what's the word? My brain just stopped. But it could be an inflammatory word, right? It could be a triggering word. I don't need managing. And I don't mean it in that way. But I think people are reluctant because they don't know, well, what's my place to say what, or what if my boss doesn't agree, or what if this damages the relationship? And you know what? You can ask those questions all the day long. But truly, if you want to have influence on your manager, first of all, it has to come from a genuine place. And I think one area where I still struggle is it's really frustrating to me when I'm working with someone who's incompetent, period, whether they're above me, next to me, or below me. I have a real issue with incompetence. and that I wish I had some good answers for you, but that situation's hard. But I would say by and large, people are competent in at least aspects of their job. And so if you genuinely are having this feeling of, I want to have a good relationship with my boss, I want to make my boss's job easier, and as I support my boss, I will get more support. Coming from that place will help it not feel icky when you're, quote, managing. And then, for example, so one complaint a lot of people have is my boss is a good person, but my boss is involved in so many things, I just don't get any time. I don't get the attention that I want, or that my projects need. And so one thing that you can do in those situations is you can just think about, okay, so if I can't, I had a situation where I had a boss who was always canceling meetings with me, and I was over this really big project, a lot of funding behind it, a lot of visibility around it. But then I was losing our place. We were going farther and farther behind because she would not sign off on decisions because she didn't have time to meet with me. And so I went to her, and I can't remember how I got her for 2 seconds, but I said, hey, I know you've been really busy, and I am noticing that we're missing deadlines and we're not meeting like the stakeholders' expectations, or to make it so it's not about you. I'm not Jen whining, right? There's a bigger picture here. And I put it in terms that my client will understand and be concerned about. And so then I said, can I get 15 minutes of your time? And I promise I can get everything that I need from you in 15 minutes. And she looked at me skeptically and she's like, really? I said, yes. Now, it took me about 2 hours to prepare for that 15-minute meeting because I summarized everything into like 5. I went from, 10 papers to like 5 bullet points. And then, here are the key decisions that need to be made. Here's the impact of the different decisions, and bam. And then we had this 15-minute meeting and I got her up to speed, and then I helped her see the different decisions. She made decisions. I think we finished in under 15 minutes and she was shocked. And guess what happened after that? I had a regular 15-minute meeting with her once a week. She never canceled on me. She never canceled on me because she knew that I was going to honor her time and that we were going to get done what we needed to in those 15 minutes. So be creative. And I mean, maybe that's not the answer for your specific problem, but step back and think, what are ways that I could get what I need that aren't orthodox, that I can fit in, to what my boss's demands are. Everybody's stretched really thin right now. So how can you make it easier for them? How can you simplify? You have a meeting with your boss, and maybe you're the boss before would always send a follow-up email to you summarizing things. Maybe your new boss doesn't have time to do it. So why don't you take the lead and summarize? Let me tell you, if you just proactively started summarizing meeting notes or conversations and bullets, just skimmable bullets, and send them to your boss, they will be so grateful because they don't have time to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you said a number of things like, I was thinking about my own experiences and how I also, work with executives, but it's not about asking permission, right? It's ask for forgiveness because you're in a role to make decisions and going, like what I really heard you say there that boss appreciated was that you came with solutions, right? It's not about, oh, what should I do? It's, I've looked at all aspects of this project. Here's what we need to do. Get your blessing so that we can move on with it. Exactly. And that's also why they hire you, right? Like you're in these roles to be able to do this. It's a little different if you're new, maybe in the role, or you don't have that experience, but right. Yeah. And then you're going to manage it a little bit differently. Maybe you go to a colleague and bounce things off before you take it to your boss, right? All very helpful. So let's switch gears a little bit, and you kind of did there. So you segued nicely into my next question, but let's think about this from the lens of the boss, right? So what is the typical impact when you have a direct report that is managing you, really? So what does that do for the boss?
So when they have somebody who is a high performer and trustworthy, who's managing them for good, with good intentions, that it does a number of things. It makes them, it takes a big burden off of their shoulders. They have a trusted relationship where they're stressed out, before they were stressed out about 20 things and one of them was you. And then, oh, I don't have to stress about you anymore because you're dependable. I know and then now I'm going to be more likely to delegate things to you. And at some point, if you want to know the secret for how I moved up in the corporate world in a Fortune 500 firm, was I made myself indispensable to my bosses. And I would just, oh yeah, I know you've got all on your plate. I can take that on. And they're, oh yeah, okay. And then guess what? Promotion opportunity is there. I've already been doing the work that person was going to do. And so, it's a no-brainer. And so that's what I would say from that boss's perspective is you want to be the solution, not the problem.
Mhm.
And then also, if, from my bio, you also saw that I was really good, good at what I'm describing, to the point where then I had issues with my own boundaries. But again, I could have been a whiny victim who said, oh, my bosses just give me too much work. Well, of course they're going to give me too much work, because I've had my career of saying, hey, let me take that on for you. And it was up to me then to figure out, okay, where are my boundaries? When do I decide I'm going to take that off your plate, boss? And when do I say, I can't help there, or I'd love to help with A, but I've got B, C, and D. So of these 4 things, which is the priority? And then let them tell you what is the priority over all those things.
Yeah, that's a great tip right there in itself. Right.
Yeah.
And it keeps you true to your boundaries, to your point. That's awesome. So, okay. So let's stick with the boss for a second. So what if you don't have that supportive boss? What if you have that boss who maybe is stuck in ego or fearful that, oh my gosh, what if my boss thinks that Jennifer's better at doing this than I am? And so how do you manage that boss from that lens?
So again, try to keep your ego out of it. If your boss has an ego, and for me, that sometimes becomes a trap. Like, well, you're trying to push me down because you're not good at this area and I am. That makes me want to, well, I'll show you. And that's not going to help anything. I really think that one of the most important things is to understand what, like I said earlier, what is important to your boss. And there's an excellent article from Harvard Business Review. It's called How to Manage Your Boss. Mm-hmm. Or is it called, or Managing Your Boss? One of the two. It's funny. I was just looking at it earlier, and it is a fantastic article, and it has a lot of questions in there, the kinds of things you could be asking your boss. But so let's say I have this boss, Fred, who's got an ego the size of Texas. I'm going to do 2 things there. One is I'm going to ask him so tell me a little bit about your career goals. Tell me about what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. And once I find out what's driving him, okay, everything I say, everything I do is going to be in the context of how is that going to help him get ahead? Mm-hmm. So feed the ego. Mm-hmm. If it's in service to the organization, the products, and your career path, why not? The other thing is, I'd say most of the time that people with the large egos have some redeemable quality that has fed that ego. So there are a couple bosses that I've had that I wouldn't work with for them again ever. But I can look back and say, wow, even though so-and-so was the biggest jerk ever, he taught me how to put together a presentation in PowerPoint. And I don't mean the actual PowerPoint. I mean, how do you get the buy-in from somebody, and what's the staging of your slides, and how do you unfold the problem in a way that, people are with you. I mean, he was a master at that. I worked with another boss that was an absolute egomaniac, and he drove me crazy, but boy, could he sell. And, he taught me how to write proposals and how to win. It had an incredible win rate. So a lot of times we might personality wise have a problem with somebody that we're working with, but you can put aside that issue and say, what can I learn from this person that's going to further my performance and my career?
Love that. Love that. And that's true, I think, with any aspect of life, right? Because we face lots of different situations that we don't like, we're not comfortable with, or, it wouldn't be how we would approach it. But I love what you said there. It's stepping back and saying, what's the opportunity? What do we learn from this? What do we take from this situation? And there's always gold in that, right? There's always gold that you can take from it and utilize to help yourself be a better person or better leader, or, whatever the situation is. So some great ideas. I think what I would like to ask is, what are maybe 2 things that our audience could walk away with today and implement with being better at managing up or managing their boss?
I would say the most important thing is I would challenge you in the next week talking to your boss, whether it's during a one-on-one that you already have, or hey, let's get some coffee, or whatever it might be, and just say, hey, how long have you been in this role? And if you don't already know, and what do you see next for yourself? Or what is it that, what attracted you to this position? What do you want to accomplish? Or, what is that legacy you want to leave behind? Some question like that, just so you can get in their mind a little bit more and know where they're coming from. So that's my main tip. My second one is I would then just give some thought to what is it that you want out of the relationship with your boss? What's your biggest frustration right now? Or what is it that if you had blank from your boss, your job, you would be so much happier at work? And once you come up with that, then just be strategic and think about, okay, what are some ways that I can get that support from my boss, that, different things I've never tried before, whether it's a 15-minute meeting, or what the other end of that spectrum is a boss is a micromanager. And usually micromanagers have trust issues, and to be able to go to your boss and say, hey, I've noticed a lot of attention to detail around this task. Tell me a little bit more about your concerns, or what's the visibility here that you might not know about. And just come from a curious place, a not judgmental place, a curious place, so that you can get a better read on what's going on for them. And then you're going to have the ideas for how to resolve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great tips. You actually prompted something else there. I just want to make sure we tap into before we wrap up. And I hear this a lot from clients as well, is it's not just about the visibility, but it's, with hybrid work environments, it's that feeling of out of sight, out of mind, and, wanting to make sure they're still on the radar for projects, promotions. And it goes back to, the boss you described earlier, who always canceled meetings. So what would be, I know what I've shared with my clients, but what would be your tips on making sure that you're thought of often, like you're always present in your boss's mind?
That's a good question. So if you have team meetings, I would make sure that you're speaking up and either offering a solution or asking a question. Just be vocal. Or maybe it's just so showing support somebody else's idea. Don't be one of those people who has to always answer every question or make a comment every single time. But I think a lot of us, especially in virtual meetings, tend to go way quiet. Also in virtual meetings, turn your camera on. Oh, but my hair is gross, or whatever. I don't care. Turn on your camera. No makeup, who cares? Not showered, who cares? But just to have your face there and somebody who can react to the person who's talking, you really underestimate how important that is. So even if it's not a cultural thing that you have to do, I would say be proactive and do that. And then the other thing I would do is, some bosses are really good about having regular meetings to discuss career development, professional development. And if you don't have a boss like that, I would say probably once every 6 months, I would reach out to your boss and say, hey, I just wanted to spend a few minutes with you and get some direct feedback on how I'm doing, where you think I'm doing a good job, where you see my next growth area to be, and just ask for that feedback if they're not just giving it to you. And those are the kinds of things then that are going to get you in front of them. Literally, if you're listening or to the camera, turn on your camera counsel, and just that you're not ever going to fall off the edge of the earth with them not noticing.
Yeah. Really good feedback. Yeah. I would just expand on also, you booking appointments in with them, like, making sure you're staying visible, and preparing. So even your comment about like showing up on camera, like you are working. So show up as if you're in the office and being really present in those conversations. I think that is such an important piece. And as the boss, like, I'll flip to the other lens. When you're having those conversations, when people don't put their cameras on or they aren't engaging, it can be very frustrating for the boss, right? Because the boss doesn't know, or am I being heard? Are they actually getting what I'm saying? So you mentioned this earlier, recapping what you said or what that person said, right? Even if you put it in the chat to say, here's what I heard you say. Did I capture that right? Yep. If you don't want to speak up, like you've got the option of chat, and those are all super important. And I think that, you also mentioned this earlier, men are really good at doing that, where women tend to shy away a little bit from it, because we don't want to be seen as intrusive or aggressive. And you need to be vocal about your needs. So I think those are really great shares, Jennifer. So thank you. Any last parting words you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Just that I have a free tool I'd love to offer your audience.
Oh, awesome.
I find that a lot of people like to be proactive in furthering their professional development. I'm guessing those who are listening right now are hoping to get tips that they can implement. But I also know that we're so busy. My guess is you probably heard a really fantastic podcast a month ago, but you couldn't even tell me right now what the topic was about because your brain has just moved on to other things. So I actually have this resource that helps you with, okay, so I've gone to this training, or I've read this book, or I've listened to this podcast. Now what? And it'll help you think through how to really integrate those learnings into your life and apply them and have support while doing them, so that you're truly becoming better as you're investing all this other time into just putting it into your brain. So not only get it in your brain, let's help you get it so that it becomes part of you and part of your actions.
Lovely, lovely. And so how do they find that tool?
Yes. So you're going to text the word accelerate, ACCELERATE, to 411-321. And that will get you in touch with me, and I get the tool out to you.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I love that, because you're right. It often it's there and then it's gone. Right. And so it's, how do you start to embody what you're learning? And you may also not come up against the situation for a little while. So that helps also to give you, that little extra when you do come up against it. Awesome, Jennifer. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation, great tips. Super excited, that our audience is able to, learn from this information and learn how to better manage their boss, level set expectations. I heard that was really important as you were talking, and humanizing conversations, so that, you understand what is your boss, like, what legacy do they want to leave? And, how do you support that? How do you help with that? So I thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, she said 414-321.
411.
Oh, 411. Sorry.
Yeah, 411-321, and you text the word accelerate. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. I wrote down 414. 411. Excellent. So Jennifer, thank you so much again for joining us today. And we appreciate that. And I want to thank our audience for listening to Women in Leadership Talk. We're all about bringing women together in a great community and sharing other amazing women and, their expertise to help each of us grow and learn as we navigate this wonderful world that we have. So again, it's Women in Leadership Talk, and thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you at the next session. Take care, everyone.